I did not know I had been kidnapped until the city lights disappeared behind tinted glass, and by then, the man holding my future in his gloved hands already knew my name. 1 minute I was leaving the back entrance of St. Mercy Hospital with a paper bag of takeout cooling against my chest, rain needling through my hoodie, my shoes splashing through shallow puddles behind the pharmacy loading dock. The next minute, a black SUV rolled soundlessly to the curb, its windows dark as sealed eyes, and a tall figure stepped out beneath the flicker of a dying street lamp. I remember the smell first, not the face. Cold leather, expensive cologne, and something sharp underneath, like winter air passing over steel. His hand closed around my arm before I could call out, firm enough to stop me, careful enough not to hurt. That was what scared me most. He was not panicked. He was not angry. He moved with the calm certainty of someone following orders that had already been paid for. "Ethan Miller," he said, my name low and exact, as if he had read it from a file. My throat locked. I had never heard his voice before. I had never seen the silver snake tattoo curled around his wrist, gleaming under the rain. I tried to step back, but another man opened the rear door of the SUV, and the warm darkness inside felt less like a car and more like a mouth waiting to close. "You have the wrong person," I said, but the words were thin, swallowed by the hiss of rain and the distant ambulance siren fading 6 blocks away. The man with the tattoo tilted his head, almost politely. "That is what he said you would say." Before I could understand what that meant, a soft cloth passed near my face, smelling faintly of clean linen and bitter herbs. The world blurred at the edges. Not black at first, just stretched and warped, like the neon pharmacy sign had melted across the wet pavement. My takeout bag slipped from my fingers. I remember watching it hit the ground, orange sauce spreading into the rain like a tiny, stupid sunset. Then the doors shut, and the city vanished. When I woke, I was no longer moving. The air was too quiet, too polished, too cold. I opened my eyes to a ceiling painted the color of storm clouds and a chandelier that looked like frozen rain. For one confused second, I thought I had been taken to a hotel, the kind people in old money families used for secret meetings and divorces. Then I saw the camera tucked into the corner, the window that did not open, and the door with no handle on my side. My wrists were not tied. My ankles were free. There were no bruises, no chains, no obvious signs of cruelty. Somehow, that made the room worse. It was a beautiful cage, and cages did not need bars when the person who owned them owned everything else too. I sat up slowly on a black velvet couch, my head aching, my hoodie damp at the cuffs. Across the room, beyond a wall of rain-streaked glass, New York glittered far below me in broken pieces of white and red. I was high above the street, maybe 40 stories, maybe more. Too far to run. Too far to scream. On the marble table in front of me sat a crystal glass of water, 2 white pills, and a single cream-colored envelope with my name written across it in black ink. Not Ethan Miller. Caleb Vale. Before I opened it, I forced myself to count the exits I did not have. The locked door. The sealed window. The camera. The smooth black panel beside the bed that might have been a speaker, an alarm, or another eye watching from behind the wall. Panic always wanted a straight line, a door, a staircase, a place to run toward. This room denied panic direction. It made fear turn inward until every sound inside my own body became too loud. My pulse. My breathing. The small, humiliating click of my teeth when I swallowed. I thought of my apartment in Queens, the laundry basket wedged against the closet because the door never shut, the chipped mug beside my sink, the old blanket on the couch my roommate swore made the whole place look sad. I had been embarrassed by those things that morning. Now I would have given anything to be back among them. Ordinary life had never felt precious until a stranger wrote the wrong name on an envelope and locked me above a city that no longer knew where I was. The name on the envelope was not mine, but it had been written with the kind of confidence that made my stomach go cold. Caleb Vale. 2 words in black ink, centered perfectly, as if the person who placed it there believed I would recognize them. I did not. I stared at the envelope for several seconds before reaching for the water instead. My fingers shook so badly the glass clicked against my teeth. The pills remained untouched. I had worked enough late shifts around hospital intake desks to know one simple rule: never swallow anything offered by someone who brought you to a locked room. The room itself seemed designed to make panic feel unreasonable. There were no rusted pipes, no concrete floor, no cheap chair under a flickering light. Everything was elegant. The couch was soft beneath me. The rug was thick enough to swallow my footsteps. The walls were lined with dark wood panels that smelled faintly of cedar and old smoke. A bowl of white flowers sat on a side table, too perfect to be real, their scent delicate and powdery. Even the rain sliding down the window looked expensive from this high above Manhattan. But every detail had been chosen by someone who understood control. The camera in the corner was small, but not hidden. The door had no handle. The windows showed me freedom from a distance I could never cross. I walked to the glass and pressed my palm against it. Cold moved through my skin. Far below, yellow cabs crawled through traffic like tiny insects. People were living normal lives down there, buying coffee, missing trains, arguing over dinner plans, completely unaware that Ethan Miller had disappeared somewhere above them. My reflection stared back at me from the dark glass, pale and rain-damp, with brown hair sticking to my forehead and gray-blue eyes too wide with fear. I looked like myself. I felt like myself. So why had someone decided I was Caleb Vale? A soft click came from behind me. I turned so fast my shoulder struck the window. The door opened without a sound, and 3 men entered first, all in black suits, all silent, all careful not to look directly at me. Then he walked in. Dante Moretti did not need anyone to announce him. The air changed before he crossed the threshold, tightening as if the room itself knew to make space. He was taller than I expected, broad-shouldered beneath a black coat still dotted with rain, his dark hair combed back from a face that looked carved rather than born. His eyes were silver-gray, calm and unreadable, and they settled on me with the weight of a locked door. I had seen men like him only in news clips that used words like alleged, organization, and investigation. Men whose names made reporters lower their voices. Men who never had to raise theirs. He looked at the envelope on the table, then at the untouched pills, and one corner of his mouth moved without becoming a smile. "Smarter than the file suggested," he said. His voice was low, controlled, almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. "I do not know what file you are talking about," I said. My voice cracked on the last word, and I hated myself for it. "My name is Ethan Miller. I work supply runs for St. Mercy Hospital. I live in Queens. I do not know anyone named Caleb Vale." Dante removed his glove slowly, finger by finger, as if time belonged to him. "Caleb Vale says the same thing when cornered. Different city. Different job. Same frightened eyes." The sentence should have died behind my teeth. People like Dante Moretti did not invite sarcasm. They punished it, or paid other people to punish it, or looked at you long enough that you punished yourself with silence. But fear had burned through the polite part of me. I was tired, hungry, damp, and trapped in a room that smelled like expensive wood and hidden threats. Something about being called the wrong name again and again made me reckless. Ethan Miller did not have power, money, or bloodline behind him. Ethan Miller had late rent, sore feet, and a hospital badge that opened supply closets. But Ethan Miller was still mine. My name was the last door I had left, and I was not going to hand it over because a dangerous man had read a file. "Then maybe you are bad at cornering the right person." The words left my mouth before fear could stop them. One of the men by the door shifted, but Dante lifted 2 fingers, and the room went still again. He studied me for a long moment. Not like a man admiring something. Like a judge searching for the crack in a testimony. "The Caleb Vale in my file is 22 years old, unbonded, trained to pass through secure buildings without setting off suspicion. He uses medical deliveries as cover. He has been photographed within 3 blocks of 4 Moretti properties in the last month." My chest tightened. "I have made deliveries all over the city. That does not make me a spy." "No," Dante said, stepping closer. "But disappearing after one of my private ledgers vanished makes you interesting." I took a step back, and the scent of the white flowers sharpened in the air, sweet enough to make my head ache. Dante noticed. His gaze moved from my face to the flowers, then to the vents near the ceiling. For the first time, something changed in his expression. Not doubt. Recognition. "Who prepared this room?" he asked softly. No one answered. The silence became a living thing. Dante did not raise his voice, but every man in the room reacted as if he had struck a bell no one else could hear. The guard closest to the door lowered his eyes. Another shifted his weight, almost too slightly to notice. The third kept his face blank, but his hand twitched near the seam of his jacket. I saw all of it because fear had sharpened me down to a wire. Dante saw more. He always would. "Again," he said, his gaze fixed on the flowers. "Who prepared this room?" The tallest guard answered first. "House staff, sir. Standard holding suite. Cleared at 9:30. Dante turned his head a fraction. The word Omega landed between us heavier than the accusation of being a spy. I had lived most of my adult life trying to make that word smaller. On hospital forms, it was a classification. In public, it was something strangers scented before they saw the rest of you. At work, it was a detail I managed with suppressants, scent blockers, and the careful discipline of never reacting first. I was not ashamed of being an Omega, not exactly, but I knew what people did with the label once they had it. They turned caution into weakness, exhaustion into fragility, fear into proof that you could not speak for yourself. Dante said it differently. Not softly. Not sweetly. But accurately. Frightened Omega. Not unstable. Not tempting. Not dangerous. Frightened. For one terrifying moment, I hated that the distinction mattered. There is nothing standard about white oleander in an enclosed room with a frightened Omega. The words were calm, but the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. My fingers tightened around the empty glass. White oleander. I knew enough from hospital supply labels to know the plant was not something people placed near patients, children, or anyone vulnerable. The flowers suddenly looked less beautiful and more like a warning dressed in silk. Dante walked to the side table and lifted one bloom by the stem, careful not to touch the petals. He smelled the air once, then set it down as if it had offended him. "Remove it." No one moved quickly, but they moved at once. One guard took the bowl away. Another opened a panel I had not noticed near the wall and adjusted something inside. The hum from the vents lowered. The sweet powdery smell began to thin, replaced by rain, cedar, and the cold mineral scent of the city beyond the glass. I breathed in carefully, but my chest still felt tight, like panic had left fingerprints around my ribs. Dante looked back at me. "Sit down, Ethan Miller." Hearing my real name from him was worse than hearing the wrong one. It meant he had decided to use it. It meant he was not confused anymore. He was choosing his next move. "You believe me?" I asked. "I believe something is wrong," he said. "That is not the same thing." I sat because my knees had started to feel unreliable. He remained standing, a black shape against the window, his reflection layered over the city lights. "Tell me about the delivery." "Which one?" "The one you made before you were taken." I swallowed. "St. Mercy sent me to a private clinic near Tribeca. It was after hours. A nurse gave me a sealed cooler and told me to bring it to a driver waiting outside. That happens sometimes. Blood samples. Medication. Lab transfers. I do not ask questions. You should have. I make $22 an hour and split rent with 2 roommates. Asking questions is a luxury." Something passed through his eyes too fast. To name. Not pity. Maybe recognition of a world where people like me survived by staying useful and invisible. "Did you see the driver?" he asked. "No. But I saw his wrist." Dante went still. "A silver snake tattoo." The room changed again, not with noise but with absence. No one breathed for half a second. Dante turned toward the men at the door, and they all looked away except the one whose hand had twitched earlier. My pulse climbed. I had not meant to point at anyone. I did not even know what I had seen. But Dante did. "Marco," he said softly. The twitching guard lifted his chin. "Sir?" "Show me your wrist." Marco smiled like he had been waiting for this, and before anyone could move, the lights went out. Darkness swallowed the room so completely that for one impossible second, I could not tell where the walls ended or where Dante stood. The city beyond the glass remained alive, 1,000 lights glittering below us, but inside the suite everything had gone black except for the red blink of the dead camera in the corner. Then the emergency lights came on, dim and crimson, washing the marble floor in the color of a warning sign. Marco was already moving. Not toward Dante, but toward me. That was how I knew I had become the center of whatever trap had just closed around us. I scrambled backward on the couch, the empty glass slipping from my hand and rolling across the rug without breaking. Dante crossed the space between us with terrifying speed, not chaotic, not reckless, just suddenly there, his black coat cutting between me and Marco like a door slamming shut. "Stay behind me," he said, and there was no room in his voice for argument. Marco stopped several feet away, his face half shadowed by the red light. His right sleeve had ridden up just enough for me to see it clearly now. A silver snake coiled around his wrist, its tiny painted eyes catching the emergency glow. My stomach dropped. He was the man from the alley. The polite voice in the rain. The hand that had known exactly how to take me without leaving a mark. "You brought him here," Dante said. "No," Marco answered, calm as a man discussing traffic. "I delivered what was requested." "By whom?" Marco's eyes flicked toward me, and his smile sharpened. "You still think this is about your ledger?" Somewhere above us, a vent clicked. A thin current of air whispered through the ceiling, warmer than before, carrying the faint sweetness of those white flowers again, mixed now with something medicinal and wrong. My skin prickled. My breath caught halfway into my lungs. The room tilted, not enough to make me fall, but enough to make the edges of everything bright and unreal. Dante noticed instantly. His hand lifted, palm open, not touching me, but shielding me from the vent as if he could hold back the air itself. "Shut the system down," he ordered. No one answered. The other 2 guards were gone. I had not heard them leave. The door stood open behind Marco, but beyond it the hallway was dark, the kind of dark that felt occupied. Marco's confidence made the whole scene clearer and worse. This was not the work of a desperate traitor improvising in the dark. The vents, the flowers, the camera, the locked door, even the pills on the table had all been arranged to create a story before the truth could speak. In that story, I was not Ethan Miller. I was evidence. A frightened Omega placed where fear could be photographed, where scent could be manipulated, where an alpha with a violent reputation could be pushed until restraint looked like possession and protection looked like guilt. I had spent my life trying not to become the kind of person powerful men used in rooms like this. Somehow, without ever applying for the role, I had been cast anyway. "They wanted you angry," Marco said. "They wanted you alone with him. Cameras running. Air vents prepared. A frightened Omega in a locked room and the great Dante Moretti losing control. Imagine what the families would say." My heart hammered so hard it hurt. This was not a kidnapping anymore. It was theater. A scene staged with me as the bait, and Dante as the monster everyone expected him to become. I pressed my sleeve over my mouth and tried to steady my breathing. "I am not Caleb Vale," I whispered. Marco looked at me with something close to amusement. "No. That is what makes you useful." Dante's stillness changed. It became colder, deeper, more dangerous, but his voice remained quiet. "Explain." Marco took a step back into the doorway. "You should ask why his face was in our files months before he ever made that delivery." The words landed in the room like a glass dropped onto stone. My face. In their files. Months before. A pulse of fear moved through me, followed by a strange, rising pressure under my skin. The air from the vent thickened again, sweet and suffocating, and this time I understood what it was doing to me. My Omega instincts, buried under routine suppressants and an ordinary life, stirred in panic. Not desire. Not longing. Survival. My body sensed threat and heat and alpha presence, and it did not know which signal to obey. Dante turned slightly, enough for me to see his profile. His jaw was locked, his eyes fixed on Marco, but every line of him had shifted toward restraint. He was fighting the room, not me. That realization almost broke me. Marco's hand moved toward the wall panel outside the door. By morning, every house in New York will know you took an innocent Omega and broke your own code. Dante removed his coat in one sharp motion and threw it over my shoulders, burying me in cedar, cold smoke, and rain. The scent cut through the poisoned sweetness like a window opening in winter. I clutched the coat closed with both hands, trembling. Dante stepped forward, placing himself fully between me and the doorway. You made one mistake, he said. Marco paused. Only one? You assumed my reputation was stronger than my control. Then Dante reached back without looking and pressed something small and metallic into my palm. A keycard. Ethan, he said, using my name like an anchor in the red-lit dark. When I move, you run to the stairwell and do not look back. But before I could answer, a second voice spoke from the hallway, soft, familiar, and impossible. He will not run from me. I looked past Dante's shoulder, and my blood went cold. A young man stepped into the emergency light with my face. For a second, my mind reached for every simple explanation and found none of them strong enough to hold. A brother I had never met. A cousin my mother had never mentioned. A trick of lighting. A stranger with surgery and patience. But the longer I looked at him, the more those explanations broke apart. He did not only share my face. He had studied how to use it. He wore my softness like camouflage, my fear like a costume he could button and unbutton whenever the room required it. Seeing him felt less like meeting family and more like finding my handwriting on a letter I had never written. It was intimacy without permission, familiarity without memory, and it made my skin crawl in a way the locked room never had. The young man in the hallway was not identical to me in the way twins are identical. He was worse than that. He was me sharpened, polished, corrected by someone who had studied every ordinary flaw and decided which ones to erase. His brown hair fell in the same soft waves as mine, but styled neatly away from his face. His eyes were the same gray-blue, but colder, trained to hold contact without blinking. Even his mouth had the same slight curve, the one my mother used to say made me look like I was always about to apologize. On him, it looked like a secret. For a moment, my mind refused to understand him. I thought the red emergency lights had split my reflection from the window and sent it walking toward me. Then he smiled. Hello, Ethan, he said. My name sounded unnatural in his voice, like a line rehearsed too many times. Dante did not turn his back on Marco, but his attention shifted enough for the entire room to feel it. Caleb Vale, he said. The young man gave a small bow, almost playful, almost elegant. That is one of my names. My fingers tightened around the keycard hidden beneath Dante's coat. The poison sweetness from the vents curled around me again, pressing against my senses, but the cedar and cold smoke in the fabric kept me steady enough to breathe. Barely. Why do you look like me? I asked. My voice came out thin, but it did not break. Caleb's eyes moved over me with a strange, clinical interest. Because your face opens doors. That made no sense, and yet every part of me believed he was telling the truth. Dante's voice cut through the thick air. You staged the delivery. The ledger. The room. Not alone, Caleb said. His gaze flicked to Marco, who remained near the doorway with the relaxed posture of a man standing in a room he believed he already controlled. But yes, I helped design the performance. To destroy my authority. To reveal your nature. Caleb corrected. There is a difference. The pressure under my skin pulsed again. Heat, fear, chemically forced instinct, all tangled into something my body could not process. I lowered my head and focused on counting. 1 breath in. 1 breath out. I had learned that at the hospital when families received news too heavy to carry. Find one fixed point. Survive the next 10 seconds. Then the next. Dante must have heard my breathing change, because his hand moved behind him, palm open at his side, not reaching for me, not touching, only offering something solid in the dark. I stared at that hand. The hand of a man who had ordered my kidnapping. The hand of a man who had also broken the camera, covered me with his coat, and placed himself between me and everyone else. I stepped closer without thinking, close enough that his scent became the wall I hid behind. That was when he froze. Not stiffened. Not hesitated. Froze, as if some invisible command had passed through his blood and locked every muscle in place. His hand lowered slowly. His head turned just enough for me to see his eyes. The silver gray had gone darker, not with anger, but with shock. The room fell away. Marco, Caleb, the emergency lights, the rain against the glass, all of it blurred behind the sudden silence between Dante and me. "What is it?" I whispered. Dante did not answer at first. He inhaled once, carefully, like a man afraid of what the air might confirm. My own scent had changed. I knew it from the way the room responded, from the way Caleb's smile faded, from the way Dante's control became something almost visible, a locked gate straining against a storm. But Dante did not move toward me. He moved one step away. The distance was deliberate, protective, painful to watch. "The room is pushing your heat," he said, his voice rough for the first time. "Do not trust what your body is telling you. I do not know what it is telling me. Then trust this." He looked at me fully, and the monster New York whispered about was nowhere in his face. Only restraint. Only recognition. Only fear, not of me, but for me. No one in this room gets to decide what happens to you. Not them. Not the air. Not even me. Caleb's expression tightened. How noble. Dante ignored him. "Ethan, the stairwell is 20 feet behind you. When the lights flicker twice, use the card. And you? I will make sure they follow me instead." The lights flickered once. Caleb took a step forward, his face wearing mine like a mask. "You still do not understand," he said softly. "He cannot let you go now." The lights flickered a second time, and from somewhere deep inside Dante's chest came a sound that was not a threat, but a warning to the entire room. "Run," he said. So I did. Later, I would hate that detail. I would hate remembering that part of me wanted to stay behind the man who had ordered me taken, simply because he was the first person in the room who had looked at my fear and called it mine. Survival is not always clean. Sometimes it attaches itself to the nearest steady voice. Sometimes it wraps itself in a stranger's coat because the air is poisoned and your own body has become a language other people are trying to forge. I knew Dante was dangerous. I knew his protection had teeth. But when he said run, he had not said come back, obey me, trust me, or belong to me. He had given me a direction and a choice. That was enough to move my feet. I ran because Dante told me to, but every step away from him felt like tearing loose from gravity. The keycard cut into my palm as I crossed the suite, my feet sliding on the cold marble beneath the weight of his coat. Behind me, the room erupted into motion without becoming chaos. Dante's voice was low and absolute, giving orders I could not fully understand. Marco answered with a laugh that vanished under the alarm beginning to pulse through the walls. Caleb called my name once softly, and that was the sound that frightened me most. Not the alarm. Not the dark hallway. My own name in my own voice, following me like a shadow that had learned how to speak. The stairwell door appeared at the end of the corridor, marked by a thin green exit sign that glowed through the red emergency light. 20 feet had never looked so far. The air outside the suite was cooler, but the strange sweetness still clung to my throat, making the world tilt in slow waves. I pressed Dante's coat tighter around me and forced myself to focus on ordinary things. Carpet under my shoes. Rain against glass somewhere to my left. The plastic edge of the keycard. My own heartbeat. I reached the stairwell and slapped the card against the reader. Nothing happened. For one terrible second, I thought Dante had given me the wrong card or that Marco had locked the system down. Then the reader flashed blue, the lock clicked, and I slipped through just as footsteps sounded behind me. The stairwell smelled of concrete, dust, and emergency lighting, so plain and real that I nearly cried from relief. I started down, gripping the rail, counting floors with each landing. 42. 41. 40. My legs trembled by 38. The pressure under my skin had not disappeared, but distance from that room made it easier to think. Dante had said the room was pushing my heat. He had said not to trust what my body was telling me. No one had ever spoken to me like that during an omega reaction. People usually talked around omegas, over omegas, about omegas, as if instinct made us less human. Dante had looked me in the eye and given me back my choice. That thought stayed with me all the way to the 35th floor, where the stairwell door opened above me. I froze against the wall. Two voices echoed downward. I could not hear the words, only the tone, hurried, irritated, searching. I ducked through the next door before they could see me and stumbled into a dark service hallway lined with laundry carts and stacked boxes. A hotel. The tower was not just a private residence. It had public floors, staff passages, places where a person could disappear if they looked like they belonged. I pulled the coat around my shoulders and moved fast, keeping my head low. At the end of the hallway, a maintenance elevator stood open. Inside, a man in gray coveralls looked up from his phone. For one heartbeat, we stared at each other. Then his eyes dropped to the black coat, the expensive fabric, the Moretti crest stitched in dark thread near the collar. His face went pale. "I did not see you," he whispered, stepping out of the elevator with both hands raised. I did not know whether to thank him or apologize. I got in and pressed the lowest button I could find, lobby. The doors began to close. Just before they sealed, a hand slid between them. My breath stopped. The doors reopened, and Caleb Vale stepped inside. Up close, the resemblance was unbearable. He had my face, my height, even the small freckle below my left eye. But his smile belonged to someone who had practiced being harmless in mirrors. "You should not have run," he said. I backed into the corner, searching for another button, another escape, anything. "Stay away from me." Caleb tilted his head. "That is what I told them the first time they brought me to a room like that." The elevator descended in silence for 3 floors. His smile faded, and for the first time, he looked less like a villain and more like a warning. "Dante thinks I was created to destroy him," he said. "But Ethan, you were not copied from me. I was copied from you." The elevator stopped with a soft chime. The doors opened onto a parking garage washed in fluorescent light. Caleb leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that made my skin go cold. "Ask your mother why your birth certificate was sealed." The parking garage looked too bright after the red-lit hallway above, all white concrete, fluorescent glare, and long rows of silent black cars. For a moment neither Caleb nor I moved. The elevator doors stayed open behind us with a soft mechanical hum, as if even the building was waiting to see which version of my face would step out first. My hand tightened around Dante's keycard inside the pocket of his coat. The sentence had always been simple before. A fact. A closed door. My mother is dead. People understood that kind of sentence, and usually stepped around it with practiced sympathy. They did not ask about the smell of antiseptic in the hospital corridor, or the way a 12-year-old learns grief by watching adults stop meeting his eyes. They did not ask about the box under my bed where I kept her scarf, 3 birthday cards, and a photograph so faded that her smile had become almost transparent. They did not ask because death was supposed to end the questions. Caleb looked at me like he knew it had only delayed them. "My mother is dead," I said. The words came out sharper than I expected. Caleb's expression changed so quickly I might have missed it if I had not been staring at him. A flicker of surprise. Then regret. Then the practiced calm returned, smoothing everything away. "Then someone made sure she could not answer," he said. The garage seemed to tilt beneath me. My mother had died when I was 12, a sudden illness that moved too fast for doctors to explain to a child. I remembered hospital lights, whispering nurses, my aunt holding my shoulders while I asked why no one would let me see her. I had buried that night under school, rent, work, and the ordinary exhaustion of staying alive. Caleb had just reached into that grave and pulled out a question I had never dared to ask. "You do not know anything about her," I whispered. "I know her name was Laura Miller," he said. "I know she worked as a records clerk at Northbridge Women's Medical Center before it closed. I know she disappeared from the employee system for 9 months before you were born. And I know your original birth record was not filed in Queens." My breath grew shallow. "Stop. It was filed in Westchester under a sealed medical trust connected to Moretti Shell Companies." I shook my head, but the motion felt weak, almost childish. "No. Dante did not know me. Dante did not." Caleb said. His father did. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Somewhere far across the garage, tires squealed softly against polished concrete, then stopped. Caleb looked past me, and for the first time, real fear touched his face. Not performance. Not strategy. Fear. They are coming, he said. Who? The people who made me. Before I could ask what that meant, a black sedan turned the corner at the far end of the garage, moving slowly between the rows. Its headlights swept over pillars, bumpers, painted arrows, and finally us. Caleb grabbed my sleeve. I jerked away, but he only pushed a small phone into my hand. There is one number saved. Call it when you are somewhere open. Why would I trust you? I asked. Because I am the only person here who knows what it feels like to wake up with your face and no history. The sedan rolled closer. My body wanted to freeze, but Dante's coat still carried his scent, grounding me through the panic. Then another sound cut through the garage, the sharp ding of a private elevator opening behind the security gate. Dante stepped out with 2 men at his back, his black shirt torn at the collar, his face controlled but pale under the lights. His eyes found me instantly. Relief crossed his expression so quickly it looked almost like pain. Caleb saw it too. Something unreadable moved through his face. He really did choose you, he murmured. What are you talking about? The Moretti line was built on possession, Caleb said. But he is looking at you like a door he is afraid to close. Dante started toward us, one hand lifted slightly, palm open, careful, as if approaching a frightened animal. Ethan, he said. Come to me. The sedan stopped. Its rear door opened, and an older woman in a cream-colored suit stepped out, silver hair pinned neatly at the back of her head. She looked at me, then at Caleb, and smiled like a scientist pleased with matching results. Dante went utterly still. Dr. Holloway, he said, his voice colder than the concrete around us. The woman ignored him and spoke directly to me. Ethan Miller, she said. You have no idea how long we have been waiting for the original to come home. She did not look like a villain. That was the worst part. She looked like someone who'd shared hospital boards, donated wings to children's centers, and knew which fork to use at charity dinners where people spoke about ethics over plates of fish. Her shoes were dry despite the rain outside. Her lipstick had not moved. Her eyes behind thin gold glasses were clear, intelligent, and entirely free of doubt. I understood at once that she would be harder to hate than Marco because she did not think of herself as cruel. Cruelty, to her, was simply research without apology. People like me were variables. People like Caleb were outcomes. People like Dante were funders who became inconvenient when they remembered how to say no. Dr. Holloway's voice carried across the parking garage with the calm precision of someone who had never needed to hurry. The sedan idled behind her, headlights spilling white across the concrete, turning Caleb and me into twin shadows stretched at her feet. Dante moved first, not toward her, but toward me, placing himself at an angle between her line of sight and my body. It was not dramatic. It was not loud. It was a single step, controlled and unmistakable, and everyone in the garage understood it as a boundary. You will not take him, Dante said. Dr. Holloway's smile did not move. Still pretending this is about choice, Dante? That is very modern of you. My skin went cold beneath his coat. The strange pressure from upstairs had faded, but exhaustion had taken its place, heavy and unreal. Caleb stood beside me, close enough that our reflections overlapped in the black side of a parked SUV. 2 faces. One original. One copy. I hated that my mind was already using her word. What do you want from me? I asked. Holloway looked almost pleased that I had spoken. Want is an emotional word. I prefer need. Your biology was part of a private continuity program funded before you were born. Your mother was supposed to understand the importance of that. Dante's jaw tightened. Laura Miller refused the program. Laura Miller stole the primary subject, Holloway said, still looking at me. She ran, changed hospitals, buried records, and raised you as if ordinary life could erase design. Caleb's breath caught. I turned toward him, and for the first time, his perfect mask cracked completely. You told me I was the first successful match, he said to her. Holloway gave him the soft, bored glance people give old paperwork. You were the first stable derivative. That is not the same thing. The words hit Caleb harder than any shout could have. He looked suddenly younger, not dangerous, not polished, just a young man wearing my face and realizing he had been lied to by the only people who had ever explained his existence. The black sedan's front doors opened. 2 men stepped out, hands visible, movements careful, but their purpose was clear. They were not here to talk. Dante's men shifted behind him. The garage filled with attention so sharp it seemed to make the fluorescent lights buzz louder. Dante did not look away from Holloway. Walk away. You sound like your father. My father is dead. His contracts are not. Holloway lifted a tablet from the folder in her hand and tapped the screen once. Across the garage, every car alarm went off at the same time. Sound exploded around us, not violent, but overwhelming. Horns, flashing lights, engines chirping awake, the concrete chamber multiplying the noise until thought itself became difficult. I flinched, covering my ears. Dante turned instantly, his hand hovering near my shoulder without touching. Eyes on me, he said, his voice cutting through the noise by sheer force of focus. Breathe. Do not follow the sound. I tried. I truly tried. But the lights flashed white, red, and Dr. Holloway was already moving backward toward the sedan. Caleb grabbed my wrist. This time, I did not pull away. Service ramp, he shouted. It leads outside. Dante heard him and made a decision in less than a second. He took the key card from my shaking hand, pressed it into Caleb's palm, then looked at the copy of me with a warning so quiet I almost missed it. If you betray him, there will be nowhere in this country small enough to hide you. Caleb nodded once. I know. Then Dante turned to me, and for a moment the alarms, the lights, the impossible truth of my birth, all of it narrowed to his silver-gray eyes. Stay with Caleb until you reach open air. I will draw Holloway away. No, I said, because the word came before fear could censor it. Dante's expression changed. Not surprise exactly. Something softer and more dangerous to my heart. Ethan, you said no one gets to decide what happens to me. His mouth closed. I stepped closer, still wrapped in his coat, still trembling, but no longer frozen. Then I decide not to leave you behind. Caleb stared at me like I had said something in a language he had forgotten. Then, from behind Holloway's sedan, a third figure emerged carrying a slim silver case marked with the old Northbridge medical seal. Caleb went pale. That case? He whispered. That is where they kept the original files. I looked from the case to Dante. He understood before I spoke. The proof of my life, my mother's choices, and Caleb's truth was about to disappear into the rain. Dante's eyes sharpened. Then we do not run, he said. We take back your history. There are moments when a life does not change loudly. No explosion. No grand speech. No music rising behind the decision. Just a sentence that reaches the place inside you where surrender had been quietly making a home, and suddenly that place is no longer empty enough to occupy. We take back your history. Not his history. Not the Moretti family's evidence. Mine. I had never thought of my past as something that could be taken back. I thought the past was what happened to you, what survived you, what followed you into quiet kitchens and subway cars and hospital storage rooms at 3 a.m. But Dante spoke as if history was not only a wound. It was also a record. A witness. A key. Dante's words changed the shape of the night. Until that moment, I had been running from rooms, files, names, and men who knew more about my life than I did. But when he said we would take back my history, something inside me steadied. Not courage exactly. Courage sounded too clean for what I felt. This was smaller, rougher, more stubborn. It was the feeling of planting my feet on a shaking floor and deciding I was tired of being moved. The garage alarms continued to scream, lights flashing across windshields and concrete pillars, but Dante moved through the chaos like he had been born inside storms. He signaled to one of his men, then pointed toward the service ramp. Block the exit. No one leaves with that case. His man nodded and disappeared between the cars. Dr. Holloway's calm finally cracked. She turned sharply toward the figure holding the silver case. Go now. Caleb stepped forward before I could stop him. He did not attack. He did not shout. He simply walked into the path of the person carrying the case and stood there with my face, my eyes, and a grief that looked older than both of us. What am I? He asked. The figure hesitated. It was only 1 second, but 1 second was enough. Dante crossed the distance and took the case from the man's hand with such controlled force that the man stumbled back against the sedan, startled but unharmed. Holloway's expression went flat. You have no legal right to that property. People are not property, Dante said. You should have learned that before you built your career on forgetting it. He handed the case to me. It was lighter than I expected, cold against my palms, marked with the faded blue seal of Northbridge Medical. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were paper files, a flash drive, 2 hospital bracelets sealed in plastic, and a photograph of my mother much younger than I remembered her, standing outside a small brick house with her hand resting protectively over her stomach. On the back, written in blue ink, were 4 words, for Ethan, not them. My throat closed. Caleb leaned closer, staring at the second bracelet in the case. It did not say Ethan Miller. It said Subject C. His face emptied. She knew about me, he whispered. Beneath the bracelets was a letter folded into thirds. I opened it with trembling fingers. My mother's handwriting slanted across the page, familiar from birthday cards I still kept in a shoebox under my bed. She wrote that if I was reading this, then the people she had run from had found me. She wrote that I had been born free, no matter what contracts powerful families signed before I took my first breath. She wrote that there were others made from stolen samples, children raised without names, and that none of us belonged to Northbridge, Holloway, or any family empire. At the bottom, there was one final line that blurred as my eyes filled. If you find the boy who has your face, tell him I am sorry I could not save him too. Caleb turned away like the words had physically reached into him. For the first time, he looked nothing like my reflection. He looked like himself, whoever that might become. Dr. Holloway took 1 step back toward the sedan, but Dante's men had already sealed the ramp. Sirens sounded somewhere beyond the garage, real ones this time, growing closer through the rain. Dante looked at her with the cold certainty of a man ending a chapter. Federal investigators received the Northbridge files 10 minutes ago, he said. Every account. Every shell company. Every name. Holloway stared at him. You would expose your own family? Dante's gaze shifted briefly to me, then to Caleb, then back to her. I would bury it properly. By the time the authorities arrived, the alarms had fallen silent, and rain misted through the open ramp like the city was exhaling. Hours later, at a safe house on the edge of Long Island, I sat wrapped in Dante's coat beside a window facing the dark Atlantic. Caleb stood across the room, reading my mother's letter for the 3rd time. Dante remained near the door, giving me space he did not have to give, guarding without claiming. I looked at him and finally asked the question that had been waiting since the red-lit room. Why did you freeze when you smelled me? Dante's face softened in the gray morning light. Because my instincts recognized you before my mind had earned the right to. I looked down at the case between us, at my mother's photograph, at the proof that my life had been stolen before I understood what freedom meant. Then Caleb spoke from the other side of the room, his voice quiet and shaken. Ethan. He held up one final photograph from the bottom of the case. In it, my mother stood beside another pregnant woman with the same silver-gray eyes as Dante. On the back was a date from 22 years ago, and a name neither of us expected. Dante Moretti. For a long moment, no one in the safe house spoke. The rain had softened outside the window, turning the glass into a gray veil between us and the ocean. Dante did not reach for the photograph. He looked at it as if the paper had become a loaded weapon pointed at a part of his life he had never known was exposed. That is impossible, he said, but there was no force behind the words. Only a man trying to keep the floor beneath him from moving. Caleb turned the photograph over again. The date is before we were born. His voice was careful now, stripped of the cruel polish he had used in the hallway. If your mother was involved, then Northbridge did not only steal from Ethan's mother. They stole from yours too. Dante's eyes lifted to mine. The recognition that had passed between us upstairs returned, but changed. It was no longer only scent, instinct, or the dangerous pull of a forced heat. It was history. Our mothers standing beside each other. Two women inside a system built by men with contracts. Two women choosing, somehow, to protect children who were supposed to belong to someone else. I sat down because my legs finally stopped pretending they could hold me. The photograph trembled in Caleb's hand. Dante crossed the room, then stopped several feet away from me, remembering the line before I had to draw it. That small pause nearly undid me. Ethan, he said quietly. I did not know. I believed him. That did not erase the SUV, the locked room, the wrong name on the envelope, or the terror of waking above Manhattan with no door handle on my side. It did not erase the fact that his world had reached into mine before he understood what it was touching. But belief and forgiveness were not the same thing, and for the first time in my life, I did not feel guilty for knowing the difference. I know, I said. But I am still angry. Dante nodded once. You should be. No defense. No command. No wounded pride pretending to be remorse. Just acceptance, and somehow that was more frightening than an apology because it gave me no simple villain to push against. Caleb sank into the chair across from me, still holding my mother's letter. What happens to me now? He asked. The question was not aimed at Dante. It was aimed at the room, at the ocean, at the dead woman who had written she was sorry she could not save him too. I looked at his face, my face, and saw the exhaustion beneath every practiced expression. He had helped trap me. He had frightened me. He had chased me through a building while wearing my name like a borrowed coat. And still, he was not the beginning of the harm. He was another result of it. You. Tell the truth, I said. My voice surprised me by not shaking. All of it. Not for Dante. Not for Holloway. For yourself. Caleb looked at me for a long time, then folded the letter with careful hands, as if my mother's words had become something sacred enough not to crease. I do not know who myself is. I looked toward the dark Atlantic beyond the window. Neither do I. Maybe that is where we start. By noon, Dr. Holloway was in federal custody, and the name Northbridge was moving through private news wires with the kind of quiet panic that meant powerful people were already calling lawyers. Dante's men brought coffee, clean clothes, and a doctor who introduced herself before touching anyone. She checked my pulse, my temperature, my sensibility, and told me the forced reaction from the room would fade with rest, hydration, and distance from the compounds used in the vents. She also asked for my consent before every step. That nearly made me cry, which was embarrassing, so I stared at the ocean until the feeling passed. Caleb refused medical care at first, then accepted it when the doctor told him refusing help was not the same as having control. He looked offended by how much that sounded like truth. Dante gave statements in the next room for most of the afternoon. Through the half-open door, I heard pieces of a life I had never imagined: offshore accounts, sealed medical trusts, old Moretti contracts, Northbridge storage facilities, names of children who had been assigned numbers instead of futures. He did not protect his family's reputation. He did not soften the words. When asked why he was cooperating, he said only, "Because silence funded this." I looked at Caleb when I heard it. He was staring at the floor, but his shoulders had lowered slightly, as if some invisible hand had finally loosened around his throat. That evening, Dante found me on the back porch wrapped in a borrowed blanket, watching the Atlantic turn black under a bruised purple sky. He did not step outside until I looked at him and nodded. Even then, he kept several feet between us. "There is a car ready for you," he said. "Where?" "Anywhere you choose. Your apartment. A hotel under federal protection. A safe location not connected to me." He paused. "Or you can stay here tonight with separate security and locked doors. No one enters your room without permission." The ocean wind moved cold through my hair. I thought of Queens, my chipped mug, my roommate's messy shoes by the door, the ordinary life that had suddenly become more complicated than any secret file. I wanted it back. I also knew I could not return to it unchanged. And Caleb? I asked. Dante looked through the glass toward the room where Caleb sat with 2 federal agents and a stack of papers that might become the first true record of his life. Witness protection if he accepts. Testimony first. After that, a name he chooses. Good, I said. Dante's eyes softened, but he did not smile. You still protect him? No, I said. I am refusing to let Holloway be the only person who decides what he is. The silence after that was not empty. It was full of everything we were not ready to say. I turned the photograph over in my hands again. My mother and Dante's mother stood in the sun 22 years ago, both smiling with fear hidden behind their eyes. On the back, beneath Dante's name, someone had written one more line so faintly I had missed it before. Let them choose each other only if the world lets them choose themselves first. I read it twice before handing it to Dante. His face changed when he saw the words. Not dramatically. Just enough for me to know something inside him had been wounded and steadied at the same time. They knew, he whispered. Maybe not everything, I said, but enough. He looked at me then, and the pull between us was still there, quieter now, no longer sharpened by poison or fear. It did not feel like a command from biology. It felt like a question waiting for a future neither of us owed the other yet. I am not yours, I said, because I needed the words in the open air. Dante held my gaze. No, he answered. You are not. And you do not get to become good just because you helped fix what your world broke. I know. But you can start there. For the first time since I had seen him walk into the locked room, Dante Moretti looked young. Not weak. Not harmless. Just human, and tired, and maybe afraid of hope because hope required patience from a man trained to take. Then I will start there, he said. I stayed that night because I chose to. The guest room had 2 locks on the inside, a window that opened toward the sea, and no camera in the corner. I checked twice. Dante's coat lay folded on the chair where I had left it, no longer the only thing keeping me steady, just a piece of fabric that smelled faintly of cedar, rain, and a night I would spend years learning how to remember without shaking. Before I slept, Caleb knocked once from the hallway and waited until I told him he could speak. He did not come in. He only stood on the other side of the closed door and said, Your mother's letter says she was sorry. I think I needed someone to hear that. I pressed my hand to the wood. I heard it. He was quiet for a long moment. I am sorry too. Then his footsteps faded down the hall. For the first time since the SUV had swallowed the city lights, I closed my eyes without feeling the walls move closer. My life had not been returned to me whole. There were missing records, sealed histories, and questions that would take months, maybe years, to answer. My mother had saved me, but she had also left me a map drawn in grief. Caleb had my face but not my forgiveness yet. Dante had my history tangled with his, but not my trust to keep. And still, beneath all of that, something impossible had survived the night. Choice. Not safety. Not love. Not yet. Choice. The right to wake up tomorrow and decide who Ethan Miller would become when no one else was allowed to name him first.